The Philadelphia 76ers suffered what I would consider is the most frustrating loss of their season to this point. It was nearly a wire-to-wire victory against the Clippers, but they came up just short in the conclusion during James Harden's return to Philadelphia. There was a lot going on in this matchup. I think people were building up the James Harden return a little bit more than needed to be the case. I don't think there's quite the amount of animosity in the air as a lot of the national media was trying to portray and build it up, even though I do have another video coming out with some quotes from James Harden immediately after the game that I did think were interesting. But specifically, there were boos, but it was nothing above the normal. I don't think James Harden compares to the stratosphere of hatred to a guy like Ben Simmons to the city of Philadelphia. But the referees might have cracked that list after last night, as they were firmly on notice following that matchup. Ultimately, the Sixers did suffer a 108-107 loss at the hands of the Clippers. As I mentioned, the Sixers nearly leading through the entirety of that, but the final few minutes of that game were an absolute mess, and the referees were a great deal to blame. Ultimately, the Sixers came up short with Kelly Oubre, unable to hit a game winner. There was a lot of controversy about whether he was fouled or not. Personally, I was more frustrated in some of the calls leading up to it than the specific last shot opportunity. I think Kelly's got to do a better job of having awareness and making sure he gets a shot off rather than trying to get bailed out by the whistle. And in reality, the shot did not leave his hand until after the final buzzer anyway in that particular situation. But there still was an overturn earlier on that it didn't make any sense to me, that they said it was out on Kelly when I did not think he touched it. And even after all the reviews, I think there's no way that you could have considered that clear and conclusive evidence to overturn in the way the referees did. And also in the play prior, I do think Kelly had a rightful argument for being fouled. And for the referees specifically, they acknowledged that as well after the game. So I want to dive into each bit of it. But what really stole headlines here was Kelly Oubre's reaction. And I know this is a kid show right here on Sixers Digest, and I'm not going to repeat some of the words that came out of his mouth, but I want to start off by just playing the video from Kelly. So immediately following the game, in which there was a no call at the very end, Nick Nurse is livid going at the officials, and Kelly Oubre sure had his back. So directly pointed at each referee, letting him know how he feels. And again, I'm not going to put the words out here in the universe that came out of Kelly's mouth, but if you cannot read exactly what he's saying here, some colorful language for Kelly Oubre. Now, unfortunately for Kelly, he was playing for free last night, as he's going to pay a pretty hefty fine for that following the matchup. But I do want to give him a lot of credit for the entirety of the thing. That for starters, I thought he played pretty solid last night when looking at the box score. He overall finished with 17, 11 rebounds. He did shoot just 6 of 17 from the field, but I thought he had some really good moments in that game. His fire, his competitiveness was really important. And I thought he was good defensively again as well, that he competed on that side of the floor, had some big plays. So shout out to Kelly Oubre for the way he played. He was obviously frustrated at the end of the game. And then what I think is even more impressive is he had this rage fit. He went nuts, letting the refs hear it, and then he immediately collected himself when speaking to the media after the game. So he gave a nice apology, opened up his press conference with that, and then he had this quote as well that really stood out to me during that process. He said, quote, "I saw Coach Nurse getting riled up, and if our coach is going to fight for us, then I'm right behind him. But at the end of the day, it wasn't cool, so I'll take whatever penalties come with that, and you just got to move on, but I got to be better in a sense." So I like him taking responsibility, being aware that there are consequences for these types of action, but it's important to have that fire, that these losses should not just fly over the shoulder. When you think you have a rightful case, which Kelly Oubre clearly did, and as evidence of that, we get this tweet from Keith Pompey coming immediately after the game, that in the post-game video review, the officials determined that a foul should have been called on Paul George in the closing second. However, no foul was called, and the Clippers escaped with a 108-107 victory over the Sixers. I hate that this is kind of how the process works for the league and the NBA as a whole. For starters, it's frustrating that referee issues are as frequent as have been the case, not just this year, but on a wide scale just situation, that referees impact the outcome of the game to a significant margin far more than should be the case. And it's frustrating when there is a situation like this, which there's clear and conclusive evidence why they're wrong, that unfortunately, you just got to wear that for the Sixers, that none of the acknowledgement that they got things wrong changed the outcome of the game or really makes anyone feel better. So I understand from the NBA's perspective, trying to have a little bit of just making sure that they are held accountable with this type of response, having the pool report, having them answer questions, these type of things after the game. But the bottom line is nothing changes when that is the case, that they still got to sit there and stew on what is ultimately going to leave a sour taste in the entirety of the Sixers organization's mouth. But this is an all-time moment for Kelly Oubre. And I've increasingly become more and more digging my heels in on the Kelly Oubre Island, and this is a situation that just makes me want to stay longer. This is the type of guy that I'm excited to have on the Sixers team. That, for starters, the passion, I love that it's there. That's important to me. To have the will to win, the desire, the frustration to wear your heart on the sleeve the way he just did, I think that's admirable. And not only to overstep in the way he did, which I think is just kind of one of those lose your cool moments. You don't got to bring the grandma involved in this type of situation, but to overstep and then be able to reel it back and hold yourself accountable in that situation, I think is really cool of Kelly. So again, he is going to catch a big fine for that. There's no doubt in my mind. I saw Lou Williams chatting up, expecting it to be 25,000 per B word in that whole rant there. So by my count, he had 6 or 7 in there. So it's going to be quite a hefty fine if that is the case that he goes. And I also think that this was notable to teammates. That one of the funnier moments that I recommend you going back and watching the full clip, it's when Tyrese Maxey's pulling him away. And you can see the look in Tyrese Maxey's eyes of like, I did not realize how crazy this dude is. And it's cracking me up that even through the process, he could not stop smiling. Look at the toothy grin on his face as he's pulling Kelly Oubre away from just letting the refs hear it. And beyond that, I like a couple things here. That for starters, Oubre doing the first thing of acknowledging Coach Nurse getting fired up. I like that Nick Nurse was a guy wearing his heart on his sleeves last night as well. But the Sixers are obviously in a bit of a rut. The results have not been there as they continue to wait for Joel Embiid to return to the floor. And Nurse is still bringing that competitive spirit. I think that's infectious from a coach. That's something that when you're bringing that will to win on a night-by-night basis, when you're in the referee's ear and fighting for your team in the way that I think besides that specific altercation at the end, I think throughout the length of the matchup, he really went about it the right way, just chirping, being in his ear. There was a lot that was picked up on a hot mic last night. At least I was listening to the national broadcast last night that I heard a lot of comments coming out from Nick Nurse. I think it's very cool when that is the case. Stuff of him calling out plays, calling out sets, fighting for his guys, saying how there should be a foul here, shouldn't be a foul here. And frankly, he backed that up post-game too, that he was not backing down from the take, that they were allowed more physicality on one side of the floor than was necessarily being the case. And again, it is very frustrating that the referees can have such a hand in the outcome of the game when things like that happen. And there were a lot of calls down the stretch that you can nitpick and look at. And again, I'll be the first one to say that I was more frustrated with some of those leading up to that final play than the final play itself. And clearly the referees, once again, openly admitting that they should have called a foul in that final play. But the overturn that they said went off Kelly Oubre's hand last when I thought it was punched out of there, as well as Kelly taking a great deal of contact when attacking the rim on that second to last play, I thought was a little more egregious from the referee side of things. But this isn't going to let the Sixers fully off the hook, so I do want to acknowledge the game here. When looking at the box score, so Tyrese Maxey leading the way as usual with 26 points, 8 assists, and 7 rebounds. I thought it was a really solid Maxey game overall, but he played 44 minutes, and I think that goes back on Nick Nurse too. That I understand this is kind of one of the most notable critiques of Nick Nurse, is he rides his guys, and Maxey's young, Maxey can do it, but this was a situation last night where I felt he looked tired out there at the end. And those final 2 plays that ended up with Kelly Oubre attacking the basket looking for a game winner, that should be Tyrese Maxey. And even if he's going to come up short, even if his legs are tired, he's not ready for the moment, this is so valuable to have him grow through this, to have this experience of, I got to be the man, I got to take the big shots. So while I didn't mind kind of the look to get Kelly downhill, I thought both these shot attempts were honestly fair, and the second one happened after a jump ball, so it's not like it was drawn up in the same way. The first one actually absolutely was. I'm not that mad about it from Kelly's end because I think he has earned it in the second tier. He also, Kelly, very much ignoring a wide open Tobias on that final play. I don't have any issue with that. I've seen a lot of critique, but for starters, I trust Kelly Oubre scoring the basketball far more than I trust him passing the basketball. And even if he did make that pass, my level of confidence in Tobias actually hitting that shot is about as low as it could possibly get right now. But my point in this being that Tyrese Maxey should step to center stage a little more. And for Nick Nurse, I think this falls on his shoulders, that you got to find a way to squeeze a couple minutes in there to just keep his legs rested and have him fresh so he can turn the corner, as he was doing for the entirety of the first half in this matchup. So I do think that was a bit of a miss, but overall, we did get an epic Kelly Oubre rant for it. I do think this will go down as an all-time moment in the Kelly Oubre storybook, and I cannot wait for the fine to occur and see what that outcome is. So shout out to Kelly for wearing your heart on the sleeve, bringing that dog mentality and the effort level. I love that you wore it, took responsibility, cleaned things up after the fact, and that proved to me once again, this is a guy that I want to go to battle with night in and night out. So let me know what you guys think of that rant as a whole. Did Kelly Oubre overstep too far? Are you as in on him as I am? Let me know everything else in the comments. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button, dropping a like, and I'll be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.